Hello fellow Dragon Ball fans, how are all of you doing today? I'm the Swag Kage and welcome to another episode of Dragon Ballogy. Today on Dragon Ballogy, I'll be tackling the topic most requested in the comments of the last video, fusion. So, fusion is certainly a big part of the Dragon Ball universe, almost playing as big a role as Super Saiyan, as it is a major plot element from the Frieza saga forward. Before getting into the thick of things though, we need to define what fusion is. Fusion is, well, just that, when two or more characters fuse to become one. In concept, it's incredibly simple, but despite that, it's actually one of Dragon Ball's most complex elements. As with Super Saiyan, there are a bunch of different variations of fusion, although the different types of fusion are much more varied than those of Super Saiyan. So, that said, we need to answer the following question. How many different types of fusion are there in the Dragon Ball universe, and what are they? Well, there are 6. Namekian fusion, the fusion dance, Potara fusion, absorption, merging, and possession. Without wasting any time, I'll jump right in and tackle all of these one by one. Because it was first to be shown and is one of the more popular forms of fusions, I'll start with the Namekian variant. Namekian fusion, originally titled Assimilation in Japan, made its debut in Dragon Ball Chapter 295, appropriately titled The Assimilation. It is first spoken of by Nail in a conversation between he and Piccolo before having its effects shown in the soon-to-follow battle between the newly fused Piccolo and second form Frieza. The procedure for Namekian fusion is pretty straightforward. The first step is selecting a host, and after that the host places their hand on the chest of the person they want to fuse with, and once that's done, the two will fuse and become one. The effects of Namekian fusion differ quite a bit from most forms of fusion in the Dragon Ball universe. Its Japanese name, Assimilation, is much more fitting than the English title of Namekian fusion, since the technique is much more of an assimilation or absorption than an actual fusion. The reason a host needs to be selected is because the two fusees do not become one whole person. Instead, the host absorbs the energy, strength, memories, thought patterns, and intellect of the person they fuse with and add it to their own. The host's appearance is completely unchanged, and their personality remains the more dominant out of the two fusees. This is why Piccolo remained relatively unchanged after both of the assimilations he took part in, but nonetheless received a few notable character changes such as increased intelligence and a more calm nature. These changes are even sometimes stated flat out, like when Piccolo gave credit to Kami for the idea of playing possum in order to extract information from Cell. In addition to gaining all the knowledge and wisdom of those they assimilate, the host of Namekian fusion experiences an enormous boost in power. The power boost isn't necessarily linear either, and by that I mean the power of a fused Namekian is not equal to the sum of its parts. When Piccolo fused with Nail before fighting Frieza, both of them were close to the strength level of Recoome, Jace, and Burger. But after the fusion, Piccolo had grown even more powerful than second form Frieza. A similarly enormous boost in power was seen when Piccolo fused with Kami. Before the assimilation, Piccolo was defeated by a single punch from Android 17, but afterwards he had shown that he was not only capable of fighting evenly with the same android, but additionally was capable of overpowering him. In the Game Boy Advance game Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors, Piccolo even fuses with his father, Demon King Piccolo, and experiences a power boost that makes him equal in strength to Super Buu. This is arguably one of the most enormous power boosts any character has seen in all of Dragon Ball, as before the fusion, Piccolo's strength was around that of a Cell Jr. Aside from what-if instances though, Namekian fusion is only used 2 times in both the manga and anime, and Piccolo takes the role of the host in both cases. The small number of uses isn't really a surprise, given that only one participant loses their entire identity in the assimilation process, not to mention that there is no way of reversing the fusion. However, in outside media like Dragon Ball video games, Namekian fusion has been given a decent amount of attention, and is even a key component in the Dragon Ball trading card game. The role of the Namekian assimilation technique is nowhere near the size of that of the Metamarise fusion dance though. The fusion dance, the technique that created Gotenks and Gogeta, is one of the most popular aspects of the Dragon Ball universe and is usually what first comes to mind when fusion is the topic. The concept first debuted in chapter 469 of the Dragon Ball manga. The fusion dance itself was not shown in this chapter or in the corresponding episode of the anime though. Instead, Goku explained to Piccolo that he had learned the technique in Otherworld and how it was different from the fusion technique. The first successful use of the technique did not appear until chapter 480, an entire 11 chapters after Goku first spoke of it, where Goten and Trunks finally successfully fused to form Gotenks. So, how does the fusion dance work? Well, honestly, Goku does a great job explaining it on his own. To cite a summary from the manga, you can only do it with someone around the same size and power, but when they do it, they become way stronger than the sum of their parts. It's awesome! Every one of them was a wimp by himself, but once they fused, they were unbeatable. As Goku said, the fusion dance, according to the manga and anime anyways, can only be done between 2 people of similar size and power. Originally, these restrictions existed alongside others like the fusees must be the same race and the sort, but Akira Toriyama recently said in an interview that it is possible to merge no matter the conditions. I'm not sure whether to take this with a grain of salt or not, given how much Toriyama tends to forget about the series, so I'll just do my best not to mention the technique's restrictions from here on out. The technique is performed in the form of a dance, hence its name, that must be executed to a T for the fusion to be successful. If just one motion of the dance is performed incorrectly, the fusion will fail per se, and create a deformed version of the would-be fusion that is actually weaker than both of its individual parts. I won't go explaining each step of the dance as that feels a bit unnecessary, so I'll just let you watch it for yourself. If the fusion succeeds, both participants will temporarily merge into one person who, as Goku implied, will be monumentally stronger than both of its individual parts. Take Gotenks, for example. Goten and Trunks were both by themselves only around Frieza's level of power as Super Saiyans, but Gotenks' Super Saiyan form was on par with Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Fusions created by this technique also have completely distinct personalities and thought patterns, although their personality traits are determined mostly by who the fusees are. A fusion's personality is sort of a mesh between the personalities of its two parts, with a bit of traits unseen in either fusee sprinkled throughout. Fused characters also tend to be sporting the clothing of the Metamorans who created the technique when they enter the battlefield, which seems to have a sort of one-size-fits-all trait as the costume size is never an issue. Aside from the time needed for two people to perform the fusion dance, the technique's only drawback is its 30-minute time limit. It also seems to increase the energy consumed by Super Saiyan forms, but this has never been outright stated, so I can't confirm it. Regardless, the fusion dance is still ludicrously powerful. Considering the fact that most fights in the series take around 10 minutes in real time anyway, there's barely any risk of the fusion ending too quickly. Despite how easy it is to use, only one character exists as a result of the technique in the manga, and that is Gotenks. Goku and Vegeta also fused to form Gogeta in Fusion Reborn and Dragon Ball GT, but aside from that, no one else makes use of the technique in either the manga or the anime. What if fusions like Tiencha, the fusion of Tien and Yamcha, and Krillin, the fusion of Krillin and Piccolo, exist within the Dragon Ball Expanded Universe, which can be seen as a testament to the technique's popularity. The fusion dance has also seen a bit of attention in many Dragon Ball video games. In the Budokai series, the fusion dance is an ultimate attack and only lasts for a certain period of time, and if its button prompts are not entered correctly, the fusion will fail and the player will be put in control of either Veku or Fat Gotenks. In the Budokai Tenkaichi games, fusion is just a relatively straightforward maneuver that combines the remaining health of the people on the team who perform it and is not timed like it is in the Budokai games. In the Raging Blast games, it's a bit useless though, since it has the same effect as a transformation but costs one of the user's teammates to use. Another method of fusion that exists in the Dragon Ball universe is Potara fusion, which debuted just a little bit after the fusion technique in Chapter 501 of the Dragon Ball manga. It's quite a bit more complicated than the fusion dance, but is nonetheless a bit similar to it. While Potara fusion doesn't require the fusees to perform any sort of specific movements in order to fuse, its effects on the users have the chance to end up being almost identical to the fusion dances. So let's start with the differences. What sets Potara fusion apart from the fusion dance? Well, for starters, Potara fusion is done through the use of the earrings worn by the Kais, also known as Potara earrings, hence the Potara fusion name. Both users put on one of the two earrings in the pair on opposite ears, and once that is done they will merge together, no questions asked. The second difference is that the fusion is permanent, and almost nothing can be done to separate the fusees apart after their union, even if both earrings are broken. The only exception seen was when Vegito, the union between Goku and Vegeta, was absorbed by Super Buu, which caused him to defuse back into each of his parts. Fusions made from the Potara earrings cannot fuse again via Potara fusion, meaning that say if you have Vegito and Kibito Kai, they cannot use Potara fusion to fuse into a Super Potara fusion. However, it is unknown if Potara fusions can use the fusion dance to fuse into an even more powerful being. Also, unlike with the fusion dance, if the fusion is performed while both participants are in a state like Kaioken or Super Saiyan, they will remain in that state permanently and it will drastically shorten their lifespan, so it is recommended that the fusion be done in base form and that the fusion transforms afterwards. Another major difference is that the resulting fusion will not be wearing a Metamorese jacket or anything of the sort, but instead a combination of the clothing worn by the fusees. In Vegito's case, he wore Vegeta's training gi over top of Goku's Kamehameha gi with Vegeta's gloves and boots. The style was one that was similar to both Goku and Vegeta's respective clothes without leaning too much towards one in particular. In addition to the clothes, the Potara fusion combines the names of both users, and the fusion dance does this as well. Vegito was formed by taking Vegeta and combining it with Goku's Japanese Saiyan name, Kakaroto, but because Goku's English Saiyan name was Kakarot, this has caused a bit of confusion in the Dragon Ball community over here in the States. The manga tried to fix this by renaming Vegito Vegerot in the English version, but I don't really like the sound of Vegerot and I think Vegito sounds way cooler. The Potara fusion also has a bit of a weird aspect that deals with the willpower of the fusees and is never outright explained in the show. Now, the Potara fusion is much more powerful than its Metamaries counterpart, as stated by Old Kai, but the exact power boost can vary greatly depending on the willpower of the individual fusees. The exact power increase from case to case is not known, but it is stated that the power-up granted by the fusion can be increased even further if the two fusees have equally dominant personalities, as is the case with the rivals Goku and Vegeta. Additionally, if both fusees possess equal willpower, both personalities will be equally present and both voices will be audible when the fusion speaks, as is the case with Vegito. In this case of Potara fusion, it is very similar to the fusion dance. However, in another case of the Potara fusion, it is almost completely different from the fusion dance. If the fusees do not possess equal willpower, the person with more willpower will remain in control of the body. Additionally, the more dominant personality's voice will be the only one audible in the fusion's voice, as is the case with Kabito Kai and even Old Kai, where the Eastern Supreme Kai and Old Kai were in control of the fused body, respectively. The concept might sound a bit complicated, and that's because it is, especially considering the fact that this was never outright explained in the show and it was only shown with the different cases between Kabito Kai, Old Kai, and Vegito. The last difference between Potara fusion and the fusion dance is that the fusees are not required to be of similar height, race, or power. Again, whether or not that's the case with the fusion dance is a bit unclear given what Toriyama said about it, but in the manga this was mentioned to be one of the differences between the two, so I do feel I should mention it. The fact that fusion could be done between anyone at all led to a few comedic hypothetical fusions when Goku was running out of options to beat Buu, those being a fusion between Goku and Dende and a fusion between Goku and Mr. Satan. The latter actually ended up becoming a playable character in Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 under the name Gokyul, wielding a massive pink spirit bomb known as the Ultra Spirit Bomb. Now, I was going to put Absorption on here and talk about all of its different forms too, but before too long I realized that Absorption has enough content to talk about that it could probably be its own video, so I'll save that for another day. I don't want to end up just glossing over it in an effort to conserve time, so you can expect to see a full video on that at some point in the future. Anyways, up next we have Possession, and in particular the possession that Baby uses on various people in the Baby saga of Dragon Ball GT. I do want to make it clear that there are other forms of possession that exist in the Dragon Ball universe, like Babidi's mind control, the time Kami controlled a random guy off the street and entered the Tenkaichi Budokai, and so on, but those aren't really as much a form of fusion as Baby's possession is. The reason I say this is because when Baby possessed someone, he was actually merging his own body with theirs and making a noticeable difference in both of the bodies while doing so. In the cases of characters like Baby Goten and Baby Bulma, these changes were all to the personality of the target and were barely cosmetic at all, with the only physical change being the way their eyes are drawn. However, it is very clear that Baby has the ability to completely change the appearance of a particular person under certain circumstances, and based on what was shown in the series, it seems like he is capable of doing this to whatever body he decides he wants as his main body. The effects may differ depending on the body Baby chooses to possess, but when possessing Vegeta, the changes Baby brought about were pretty radical. Now, I could verbally list all the differences in appearance, but because there's not really any point, I'll just let you look at the differences between Baby Vegeta and Baby Vegeta. Another interesting ability he seems to have when in possession of his main body is the ability to transform, and while I don't know if this transformation is related to Super Saiyan in any way, I can say that the changes present in each transformation are very real, very radical, and increase power a lot. I'm not really sure how much more powerful Super Baby 1 and 2 are than regular Baby Vegeta, since he kind of thrashed a GT Goku in all three forms, but I can say that the form of possession is crazy powerful because of how much stronger it made both Baby and Vegeta. Neither of them were anywhere close to Goku's level of strength on their own, but after the possession, Baby Vegeta was on an entirely different plane of power than Goku was. The final method of fusion in the Dragon Ball universe is merging, and to briefly summarize it, it's, well, the most basic kind of fusion, like, ever. Merging is where two characters just kind of become one without doing any sort of crazy convoluted dance or whatever. While this type of fusion never made its way into any of the manga, it did see 3 appearances throughout the series, once in the Tree of Might, once in Yo Son Goku and his Friends Return, and once in GT. When it appeared in Yo Son Goku and his Friends Return, merging was used by Abo and Kato to form into Akka. Honestly, Akka is pretty unremarkable, and the same is also true with the fusion done in the Tree of Might between Raisin and Lakusei. Raisin and Lakusei's fusion doesn't even have a name though, making it even more unremarkable than Akka. All I can say about the forms of merging that were used in these two movies is that it made the two characters more powerful. I don't know how much more powerful, but more powerful. Now, there is one last use of merging that I'd like to talk about, and this one in particular is actually really cool unlike the previous two. This one is seen in Dragon Ball GT, where Android 17 and Hellfighter 17 fuse to form Super Android 17. Now, while I'm not a very big fan of the Super 17 saga or his fight with Goku, I can certainly say that Super 17 himself is absolutely awesome. In the Dragon Ball video games, he's easily one of my favorite characters to play as, and from a design perspective, I'd say Super 17 is also pretty awesome. Before I get too deep into talking about why Super 17 is so great though, I need to explain how this particular instance of merging works. While I honestly have no idea how much stronger the fusions of Abo and Kato or Raisin and Lacazette made the fusees together, I'm pretty sure I know what the effects of the fusion that made Super 17 were because this one is actually explained. So, initially, Super 17 is supposedly twice as strong as regular Android 17 according to both Dr. Mew and Super 17 himself, but I honestly don't know if I believe that considering how he completely thrashed the Z fighters. In any case, when fused, Super 17 gained the ability to absorb ki, and as a result, any ki attacks he is hit with make him much more powerful. This is why he was able to nearly demolish Goku after absorbing his 10 times Kamehameha, and might also explain why he was able to completely destroy the Z fighters if he really was only twice as strong as regular Android 17 to begin with. The ability to absorb ki isn't the only ability Super 17 gained after fusing though. He has a really long list of crazy skills, but the two coolest abilities he got were Telekinesis, which you can see him use on the forest when he fights Goku, and the ability to pinpoint anything located in the planet's atmosphere. It's called Ultra Sensitivity, and it's actually really cool. I don't think any other character in all of Dragon Ball has had an ability like it, and it makes Super 17 stand out quite a bit. Now, I'm not quite sure why Super 17 ended up with these abilities, but they're pretty awesome nonetheless. But anyways, that's all for today's video. So if you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like rating and subscribing to see when I release new content. If there's any aspect of the Dragon Ball universe you'd like me to talk about, leave a comment below and I'll add it to my ever-growing list of Dragon Ballogy topics. With that said, I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, and I bid you farewell. Swagkage, out.